Hi, everyone. Shannon Petrovich for Therapist Talks, and we are live. So, we had a couple of questions pop up since I announced the live stream would be today, and I will start with those. And I'm also going to share some things about the most recently watched videos and my new book and all kinds of things like that. So, I will post this um, as a recording later, and so anybody who missed it can do that. But anyone who's here, go ahead and let me know if you can hear me and see me okay. This is the first time I've streamed on this platform. YouTube has changed it, and I have no idea if it's going all right. So please let me know that you can hear me and see me. Just give me a thumbs up or something, and I will make sure that I have that going on too. Okay, so we're going to start with a couple of the. Uh, so, can anybody? Let me just make sure that we're good. So, I just want to make sure everybody can see me and hear me. Give me a thumbs up. Okay, I got a thumbs up. Okay, good. That's good to know. Okay, so if you have any questions or anything that you want clarification on during the live stream, just let me know. You can type it in. I'll address it as I get a chance to. Thank you for the thumbs up again. So we're going to talk about the couple of things that came through on the comment section, and we'll start there. And then, like I said, we will go from there to my most recently watched videos and recent questions that other people had, and we'll just kind of create a dialogue. You guys jump in whenever you feel like it. I want to apologize. I've been neglecting y'all for a while. What I found was that writing the book and doing YouTube channel stuff was just the same bandwidth, and I couldn't keep all the plates spinning all the time. And so I thought, you know what, I got to get this book done and out, and then I will focus back on the channel. So I'm back. So the first question that came in was from somebody who calls themselves Becoming. And I love that. I just think that's amazing because hopefully all of us are becoming ourselves, our best selves. And I think that's absolutely wonderful because in this world, there's just so much focus on being like everybody else. And, Leo Buscaglia used to say, if you're a grape trying to be a grapefruit, you're always going to feel like a failure. You're going to feel too small and too purple. And so you get the idea. So, anyway, we're going to talk about her question, which is that for 2 years, she was no contact. And then this person was assaulted by with a gun. And now she's been caretaker for a year, and that's been overwhelming, and that she wants idea with the negative toxic ways, and she wants ideas for how to remove herself from him for good. And this is so interesting. This is a great question. Just to give you a little caveat, obviously this is not a therapy session. I'm going to talk in general terms, and this is a great start because this is so common, sadly, that people, even going no contact for a couple of years, can get sucked in so quickly. And when we get sucked back in, the first thing we tend to do is beat up on ourselves, and then we feel like we have to be there for that person. The fear, obligation, and guilt set in again. You're just completely in the fog. It's disorienting, it's confusing. You don't know where up is, where down is, and you just kind of keep going along for the ride. And then it goes into crisis, and then placating, and crisis, and then peacekeeping. And so we end up having this merry-go-round of drama that is absolutely exhausting. When people come out of these kinds of relationships, they're completely depleted. And so it's super important that as soon as you have an awareness, it's sort of like if the fog lifts a little bit and you can kind of see the horizon and kind of see land, you got to head for that land right away and get into that safe harbor before the fog sets in again. And part of figuring out where the land is to really see things for what they are. You've got to look at the truth of the situation, not what you hope it would be or wish it would be, or in your most kind and caring and empathic self believe might be possible. And that's another thing that we have to look at in ourselves, is that we can't we have to look at reality. So I talk about it in the book as you radar reality. So when you're lost in the fog on a sailboat, um, that that fog is so disorienting and so overwhelming. But if you look at the radar, you've got the outline of the land and you've got the outline of other ships coming in, and it's really hard to trust that. But you have to kind of screw your brain on straight and say, look, that's reality. So in a relationship, what you have to do is look at, what are the facts, just the facts, not what I hope, not what I wish, just the facts. The facts are, this person is hateful and hurtful, mean, abusive, is never there for me. I'm always there for them. Those kinds of things. Those are the facts. That's not likely to ever change. So you have to say, okay, since those are the facts, I have to guide my ship based on that radar reality. Even though it feels uncomfortable and all that, I have to guide my ship based on those facts and the reality. So when you get yourself involved in that reality again, that can help cut through all the fear, obligation, and guilt. So if we think about the fear, it's a sneaky thing. It happens over time. So you're not initially afraid of this person. They are charming, they are wonderful, and you think, oh, this has got lots of potential and yada, yada. And then the mood or the anger or the, threats or what have you happen, and you start to go, wow, how did that come about? Of course, they're going to blame you. And so then you go, oh, well, maybe I did it wrong. And maybe if I do it differently, then they'll see that I'm really trying and we can make this work. So you have to look at not, so that's where the fear starts. Then the obligations start. For this situation, it looks like part of the obligation happened when that person was assaulted. So they sucked you back in because they obligated you to take care of them. If we are empathic people, we tend to get into those caretaking, peacekeeping, placating roles with others. We might have come from childhood in that role. We have to look at that. That's another whole pile of worms that we have to kind of unravel and look at. So it's really important that you look at that and take ownership of that in a really kind, gentle way. And then the guilt. So these people are really good at flipping guilt on you as well. And when you get lost in that guilt, then you're trying harder and harder and harder. So when you step back from that and really look at, okay, what's going on here? The reality is, I'm living on breadcrumbs. I'm not getting taken care of emotionally. I'm giving, giving, giving. I'm completely depleted. I'm completely overwhelmed. And if that's real, and you make a wise decision. See, there are two parts of our brain. I know I'm biting off a lot, but there are two parts of our brain. We've got that reactive part that's that very emotional and reactive, and then we've got our wise mind. So that reactive part is called the amygdala, and that knows fight, flight, and freeze, and that's all it knows. And when it's going off, your higher cortex, your wise mind is offline. It's like having a computer offline. So that's not a good state to be in. But that's where we tend to live and camp out when we're in an abusive relationship, right? Because I'm either in a fight or a flight or a freeze mode. So when we're in that reactive mode, we don't think well, by definition. So it isn't that I'm stupid. I'm not thinking well because I'm in fight, flight, or freeze. So we have to calm that down. We have to take everything upstairs and reason it out, and then again, get connected to reality. So from that place, that's where you have to make that decision. Like, okay, I can't be in this relationship any longer. This is toxic. This is unhealthy for me. And then when you make that decision, then you got to start walking it through. And you got to stick to that decision, even when the fear, obligation, and guilt get fired up again, because they will. And that person is going to try to draw you back in. They'll do a little love bombing, and then manipulating and then devaluing, making you feel like you are less than, so it's not about them. So in these situations, when you get sucked back in again, you have to go through the whole process over. You have to look at the reality. You have to look at it logically and rationally, not with your emotional mind. Your emotional mind is always going to get hooked in again. Your emotional mind is trauma bonded to this person, okay? And that means that over time, they've trained you to attach to them and look to them and focus on them no matter what. Even if they're being abusive and mean and horrible, you're still like keyed into them and trauma bonded to them. Okay. But your wise mind is not trauma bonded to them. And that's the key. Okay. So your wise mind can look at the reality and say, I got to get out of this. And your reactive mind is going, no, 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 no. But you're quieting that down and saying, it's all right. We got this. Then you have to go through the process of separating, not just physically, but emotionally. And the way you do that is you keep drawing yourself back to that reality. And you keep drawing. In fact, journaling, and that's why my book is kind of focused on journal prompts and journaling. I believe this is really, really critical and really important. When you write down all the reality that you've figured out, that can be super key to keeping yourself on track. And whenever you get triggered and your amygdala is going crazy and you're in fight, flight, and freeze again, you just say, okay, quiet down and go back through my journal. Everything I wrote down is still true. And so I'm going to reconnect to those realities and I'm going to walk through this. Okay. So in terms of tips to get done with this for good, separate and understand the amygdala versus the wise mind. Quiet down that amygdala. I talk a lot about different types of self-care, but all kinds of prayer and meditation and things like that. What you're doing is quieting down that amygdala, that reactive emotional mind, and you're able then to take it upstairs and make good decisions. So keep those things separate, write down the realities, and walk through so that you can emotionally as well as physically separate from this person. So the second one was shifting gears now to adult children who have narcissistic qualities. So those are really tricky. And when your son or daughter is a narcissist is one of the videos that's been really picked up and really being watched a lot lately. And I think that that's something that's really, I guess, got a lot of people very upset and unhappy. And I know it's a really painful situation because oftentimes there are grandchildren involved. And when you are separated from your grandchildren, that's extremely painful. So one of the things that's really important is to recognize that you might treat this situation differently than a situation where it was just a partner relationship or a colleague relationship where it's easy to just sever, walk away, replenish, rejuvenate, rebuild yourself, and not look back. Whereas when your kid and your I just saw a bunch of hearts come through. That's why I smiled. When your kid, your adult child, is blasting you, wow, that's painful. And when they're withholding your grandchildren from you, wow, that's doubly painful. So this is different. And because it's different, we're going to treat it differently. It's not always the best thing to go no contact. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's essential for your own well-being and your own mental health that you have to. But a lot of times you can learn how to emotionally separate and emotionally distance yourself so that you can actually play well in the sandbox. And it's an art as well as a science. So you have to stick with me for a minute. And a lot of you are going to say, no, you've got to cut it off, go no contact. It's best for you. It's not always best, honestly. A lot of people do that. I wouldn't judge them. And a lot of people don't, and I'm not going to judge them either. So you have to figure out what's best for you. But here are some strategies if you want to stay connected, if you want to reconcile. And the ways to do that are to start to learn, again, to look at reality, that their stuff is their stuff. So it's not about you. You have to emotionally separate and distance yourself so that you're kind of watching the circus go by, if you will. And I also call it sort of being an anthropologist. Like if you're an anthropologist or a journalist, you just be taking notes. You're not getting emotionally involved. You're not going, oh my God, what did you say to me? And you're not really reactive. You're just present. Okay. So when you do that, you actually take a lot of the heat out of the situation. So when your goal is to play well in the sandbox, your goal is to stay reconciled and reconnected, you don't have to engage in every argument. In fact, you probably want to engage in zero arguments because the the truth is you're not going to win any, and so why bother? What you want to do is prioritize the grandchildren if that is what you're trying to prioritize, or prioritize the relationship with your kid, and that can be really helpful and healthy. Again, this is not for everybody. If there's abuse, forget it. You're out. But you also, then that's another conversation about, whether you have to report that the kids are abused or not. That's all different. But if it's not violent, it's just toxic, and you're just having a hard time, or they won't listen to you. Is what the question. I wouldn't worry so much if they listen to you. Our kids don't listen to us. Our kids have their own lives. We do the best we can to raise them as well as we can, and then send them off into the world, and their thoughts and beliefs and all of that is now theirs if they're adults. So a lot of times we may be over involved with our kids, and we want them to hear something. And would it be great if they did? Yeah, be wonderful, but it's not likely. So you got to pick your battles, and that might be zero battles. It might be that you just want to be reconciled, be kind and caring, and emotionally not let yourself get hurt. And the way you do that is by not emotionally involving, by watching the circus go by. And so when you see that behavior, you go, oh, there it is again. So you're not surprised, you're not hurt, you're not upset. You're just like, oh, there she goes again. I'm going to just sit back, stay present in myself, take care of myself, and watch the circus. When another behavior happens, it's like, okay, that's all right. It is what it is. If you get time with the grandkids, cool. If it doesn't happen, oh well. That you just kind of start to take care of you, stay present within yourself, and not get so involved and then so reactive and then so upset when things don't go the way you wish they would go. If you're reconciled and you get to see the grandkids, that's a lot, and that's maybe enough. You're not trying to get your emotional needs met through them, and you're not trying to make them understand things the way you see them. Um, they they have their own thoughts and beliefs, and you have to separate yourself from that. And that can actually go a long way, because when an adult child feels like you don't respect their thoughts and beliefs, they can be pretty resistant to relationship. So even if you don't agree with them, again, not talking about abuse, but if it's just disagreements, it's really important just to let that go, because if that's the only thing in your way, it's not worth it. The battle's just not worth it. All right. So, have you run into a client who was physically injured by a narcissist in a supposed accident, causing severe complications in pelvic muscles? After causing that pain, she acted as a victim herself and neglected to provide any kind of empathic support. I thought this was a Q and A. This seems like a lecture. Okay, so I am going to try to address that. So if somebody was injured by an accident, but it looks like it was actually a fight, and acting like a victim, I'm still a little bit confused by that question. If you want to try again, I would totally welcome that. But I guess in general, it is very common for people not to want to share in what's going on when they're lost in that fog, because they're completely blaming themselves anyway. So holding up that facade is just part of what they've done. They protect the narcissist or the abusive person. They take on responsibility for all of that because they've accepted the story of the narcissist that they are to blame, and they are beating up themselves with their own internal negative self-talk, which is really, really painful. And actually, when you're healing, the most important thing you need to do is start from the inside. So you have to start with how you're talking to yourself inside your own head. So anyway, if somebody is seeing themselves as the victim, um, but also to blame, they have to sort that stuff out, and that's very confusing. And it takes a lot of internal work to sort out what's going on inside your own head and how that's coming out into sort of degradation and self-depredation. That's really painful. Um, Adult daughter. I have a grandchild, so we talked about that quite a bit. And it's difficult to work on emotional boundaries. So the emotional boundaries is a really good challenge, and we can do this in all aspects of our lives. So if you have people at work that you don't necessarily get along with, or you meet people that are in your sphere that you have to kind of play nicely in the sandbox with, and they you do, I mean, most people don't get along these days because our politics are so divisive. And so how do you learn to have boundaries? And boundaries doesn't mean that you stand up and fight back. It might, but it might just be that you emotionally distance yourself and you take care of you, and you don't let that. It's sort of like the old Star Trek with the shields, and the Klingons would be fighting and shooting lasers, and the shields would hold up. But just as in Star Trek, the shields only hold up for so long, and then they start to break down. So if you're getting bombarded a lot, then your energy and your shields are going to fail. So you have to go back to taking care of yourself. You have to separate emotionally and physically at times so that you can replenish, rejuvenate, and have the energy to have boundaries or shields up. Okay. Do all narcissists hoover? No. It's really interesting to note when you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, it can end in a bunch of different ways. They might see a new shiny object and go flitting off, and you never hear from them again. Or they might have caused so much drama that you're completely depleted. You are completely bankrupt, really. And then they say, wow, she's all used up, and heck with her. So they might leave you for that reason. And then if you get well and you rejuvenate and you're all yourself again, they might hoover back in. And I've seen that over and over again. And they, promise they've changed. They promise it's all good. And it's just another merry-go-round on the abuse cycle. So don't get sucked into that one. So that they can see another shiny object, they can use you up, and you're bankrupt, and then they just take off, but then they come back and hoover when they see that you're doing well. Or they can, you can end it because you got sick of that. And so when you end it, they more than likely will hoover. I mean, they could just peace out, but they more than likely will come back and try to hoover. If they don't get their way with that, then they will try to send in the flying monkeys to harass you and make you feel awful, because they lost their control of you. And that's the real key in most narcissistic relationships, is manipulation, control. And when they lose that control, then there's that internal implosion and then explosion. And so they're like a hot air balloon. And if they're not being fed that adoration all the time, then they implode and then they explode. So if you're in that kind of relationship, if you're not bolstering them up, then they might get sick of you and peace out, or you're not bolstering them up because you're getting sick of it and you're done. And then they're going to come and just really come in hard and try to grab back power and control. Thanks. Somebody asked about my new book and congratulated me. Thank you very much. And haven't gotten a copy yet, but wondering if it teaches boundary setting. So here's the new book cover. I don't have mine on paper. This is the Kindle cover. Out of the fog into the clear. Journaling to help you heal from toxic relationships. We do teach boundaries, and I gave away my copy to a woman that needed it. So I do talk about boundaries. I talk about watching the circus go by. I talk about emotionally separating, and I talk about leaving as physically as well as emotionally, because a lot of people have left their partner physically and they're still ruminating about that person, and they're still obsessed on that person, and they're still completely enmeshed with that person even though they don't live together or they're not together. Or if it's an adult child, even though they're 3,000 miles away, there's the thought of them and all the drama around them is still dogging you. So you've got to leave emotionally as well as physically. But yes, boundaries are key, and they don't always solve the problem, but they give you a lot of good information. So a lot of times when I'm working with a client, I will say, look, we're gonna talk about all these boundaries now, and then you're gonna gather information, because you might set all these boundaries in place and the person says, heck with that, and blows a gasket and rages, and you decide you have to leave because you're in danger. The other possibility is they go, wow, I've been a real douchebag. I'm going to respect your boundaries. I've seen both happen. And honest to God, I would not have guessed that this one acquiesced to the boundaries and this one didn't. I would have called it the other way. So you never know. Okay. So always start, unless there's violence, always start with the boundaries to see what happens. Because if you set good boundaries and you say, I'm not going to be treated that way, and you walk away when somebody is talking to you that way, or you hang up the phone or what have you, those are good boundaries. Those are helping you to take care of you and helping you to stop participating in that negativity cycle with that person. And I have seen people come around that really surprised me, honestly. So you never know. So set the boundaries and then gather information. If the information is this person absolutely does not tolerate any boundaries from me whatsoever, good information. You can end the relationship, no contact, done. If the information is that person respects your boundaries, then you have to grow your boundaries and become more and more assertive in your communication and that kind of thing. Does that make sense? Okay. So getting back into a caretaker role. So this is really interesting that when, again, I'm not being anybody's therapist, but typically when we take on a caretaker role with somebody in our adult lives, we had a caretaker role with somebody in our childhood lives. And that's what gave us a sense of meaning and purpose and value and worth. And so we have to kind of take a look at that and say, okay, that's my old story. And that's an interesting story. And it's made me this empathic, wonderful person. But I cannot live that way in that story any longer because I put myself in the path of people who don't treat me right. So you have to retell that story and decide, I have to first take care of me. I've got to put my mask on first and then help the person next to me. So if you're depleted, if you're not taking care of yourself and you're constantly caretaking others, you've got to stop and you've got to look at first, am I gaining my sense of worth and purpose and meaning from that? And if I am, I need to take care of me in a different way. I need to recognize that I'm a child of God like anyone else, and I deserve to just be okay. And I deserve to take care of myself, and I deserve to treat myself like my own best friend. Like I would never talk to myself the way that person is talking to me, and therefore I need to not let that person talk to me that way, if that makes sense. So that so you have to look at, do I am I gaining some sense of meaning and worth? And if I am, then I need to let go of that. I need to take care of myself. Again, starting to set boundaries with this person. Maybe this person will respect your boundaries. I don't know. But I would set some very clear um, boundaries around, I need to do this and this and this to take care of me. I'm just done with this caretaking role and I'm leaving. You know, those kinds of things, you have to make decisions for yourself again, but setting boundaries, as being assertive in your communication, and then taking information about what happens when you set boundaries. If they blow a gasket, there's no hope there. If they respect you, there may be. Okay. Let's see. Actually, oh, okay. So the person caused the harm and then played the victim. So those things are really typical of narcissists because they never ever take responsibility for their own actions, and they will manipulate things to create drama and then flip and play the victim. And that is very destabilizing and very upsetting and can be really um, really confusing. So I've seen that a lot, and that's really hard, especially if they kind of broadcast to the world that they're the victim and you're the abusive person when it's they that had started that. Unfortunately, I've seen a lot of that, and that's a really good reason to really steer clear of that person, because when a person is able to lie to that degree and manipulate to that degree, there more than likely is no hope that you could ever be in relationship and trust that they would be um, empathic, caring, uh, decent, fair, honest, any of the things that we need in a relationship. Okay. So I think that that type of person, again, this radar reality, these are the things that are real with this person. That list is just not tenable, if that makes sense. Okay. Um, Instead of having some remorse and being there for support. Yeah. So that lack of remorse is a huge red flag too. So when you list off these things that are happening, if somebody has no empathy, if somebody has no remorse, if somebody has no ability to apologize, to come back around and see what their part in it is, there's very little hope that that relationship is going to be okay. Now, again, if it's an adult child and you need to stay reconciled or stay sort of at a peaceful place with them just so you can see your grandkids and stay in relationship, that's a different thing. But if we're talking about a relationship, that's probably not a tenable relationship, because those kinds of things indicate that they have zero ability to have any empathy for you. It's going to be a one-way street. You're going to be living on breadcrumbs. You're going to be basically emotionally starving to death until you're bankrupt, they leave, and you're done anyway. Yeah, so taking care of everybody and everything is kind of how we initially get set up. Um, and so if that was your role in childhood, you just have to be aware of that in adulthood. And the cool part, and what I really want to encourage you to see, is that those are great qualities, and a lot of the things that hang us up with narcissists, they're great qualities. If you're empathic, if you believe in people, if you believe what they say, if um, you believe the best in people, you see the best in people, those are great qualities to bring to a relationship, but not great qualities to bring to a relationship with a narcissist, because they go, oh, check. Yep, she's going to take responsibility for all my crap. Cool. Check. She's going to take care of me and not ask anything of herself for herself. Cool. So check, check, check. They basically see that you're the perfect fit for them because they can use you up. So those are great qualities. You have to say to yourself, I like those parts of me. And see, this is where we get into healing, right? Because in the depths of the fog, we feel like crap, we feel awful, we hate ourselves. But when you can step back and see, wow, those qualities in me are exactly what I like about me, got used and abused against me. But it wasn't about me being awful. In fact, it was about me being a person that I like and respect. So that's really important information. So you're going to take that with you, leave that behind, if that makes sense. And so now, sort of armed with these positive character qualities that you know you like in yourself, like if you met you, you'd like you, that's cool. And so then you bring that to your rebuilding of yourself. And this, I go into a bunch of stuff about rebuilding. That's kind of the last piece. And so when you're rebuilding your sense of self, you're rebuilding your life because they've isolated you. You're rebuilding your passions that you let go of. When you're constantly involved with somebody's moods, their ups and downs, their emotions, and you're constantly over invested in that, you lose yourself. You don't know what you think, you don't know what you feel, you don't know what you want, you don't know anything about yourself. So you have to literally start from scratch and go, wow, who am I and what do I want? And what do I do from here? Because it's just you're bankrupt, and so you've got to go into all of that. That's really, really critical. Okay. Is it a rarity to have an adult narcissistic child? Sadly, no, it's not. I think our society has gotten really narcissistic, and it's becoming, I don't know, there's a lot of entitlement, there's a lot of self-centeredness, there's a lot of our selfie culture. And so there are a lot of this generation that are there's more narcissism now than there used to be. I don't know exactly why. I can't dissect it all, but I deal with it a lot in my practice. I have a lot of clients who come because they have an adult child that is very narcissistic traits. I'm not going to say they're narcissists because I can't know that if I never met them, but the traits are there, and the parents are really struggling with how to deal with them, and really sad about being away from the grandchildren as a result. Codependency. So codependency is so if you think about alcohol dependency or drug dependency, that's when a person needs that drug, needs that alcohol. Codependency is when a person needs that other person. And so instead of being able to kind of be present within myself, watch whatever's going on and not take it on, when we are overly codependent, it means that we are easily enmeshed with others. We define ourselves with others' approval or lack of approval. We are dependent on them in the same way someone is dependent on alcohol. And so that dependency is so intense that that person becomes our food, our drink, our our every need. And that is it's an unhealthy relationship for you because you're not self present. You're focused on that other person to sort of gain a sense of self, a sense of okayness, a sense of anything. And when you do that, then that person has way too much power and control and input into your life. So if you're an interdependent person, meaning I have my whole self and I can be in relationship with my husband and be totally present with him, and we can each go do our own thing, and each of us is totally fine too. And so when that's true, then I feel good within myself. He feels good within his self. We get together, we have a lot of fun, and we still can do our own thing. And I don't lose myself when I'm with him. I don't lose myself when I'm not with him. So that's kind of interdependence. Codependence is when I can't function without that person. If they're not with me, I'm insecure, I'm upset, I'm obsessed, I'm ruminating. And that's extreme codependency, okay? And so if that's true for you, then it could be that you've had these abusive relationships and you've been trained into focusing on them, and you've trauma bonded with others, and you notice their moods, their ups, their downs, their thoughts, their feelings, and you have no contact with your own. And again, that's the problem, is that you don't know who you are, or what you're doing, or why you're doing it, and you're constantly attaching to them like alcohol. So that's the unhealthy codependency. And if that's true for you, then again, that rebuilding of self, that rebuilding of, what do I like? What do I want? What do I think? What do I feel? Those basic questions you have to start to answer. And feeling okay being alone. I talk about this in the book. It's actually, I had done a video on it years ago, called JOMO, the joy of missing out. And it's about taking separate time, taking alone time, going to the wilderness, going on a hike, going on a bike ride, going on a walk, just you, and really starting to reconnect and re-feel who you are and what you're about. And that's a beautiful process. It's extremely important. So embrace the joy of missing out. Okay. So let's see. So true. She used my love for her against me. Yeah. So that the manipulation is constant, and that love bombing and devaluing, and love bombing and devaluing is the foundation of the trauma bond. And then what happens is that that person has trained you so that you start to devalue yourself. And then their work is pretty much done. They can kind of let you go do that thing, and you are devaluing yourself constantly. You are so confused and lost with their love bombing and devaluing that you feel like, gosh, it's so wonderful that they love me because I'm so unlovable. I mean, it's just, you get so messed up in your head. And again, you've got to figure out the reality, make a decision from your wise mind, and then move through that. Yeah, good. Do you provide counseling out of state? And thank you for this live chat. No, I don't. So my private practice is really, really full. And that's kind of why I started the YouTube channel to begin with, to share with more people than just one person 1 hour at a time, because that seemed not very generous. And I could see people from all over the world that had no access to therapy, and so that's why I started the channel. And then after doing this channel for 3 years, I realized that there was a lot of stuff that I kept kind of coming back around to, but I didn't. In 10-minute videos, I couldn't share it all, and so that's why I put all of this together into this new book. I'm not trying to make money off of it. As you can see, I've kept it really cheap. I just want to share the information that I gathered over years and years of working with people. Is it common for nurses to be narcissists? That's interesting. I think there are common work kinds of things, and it's not. I don't know if I can generalize it to nurses. As a social worker in some of the psychiatric hospital settings that I had to work in my early practice, I can say that social workers and nurses did not get along. And I did meet some who were like Nurse Ratchet, that if you've ever watched One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, um, but yeah, I think that ideally nurses are very empathic people, but I think there are a lot who are not. So I don't think it's generalized to nurses. But and some of the other things that people have talked about lately are, what are the causes of narcissism? And I don't have a lot of um, good information, or I don't have a complete picture about that, except that it's a combination of things. And and first of all, I think it's important to notice, if you're ruminating a lot about the causes, that's you, again, kind of attaching to that person and ruminating about that person. And in the questions that come to me on my channel in the comment section and that sort of thing, I see a lot of that, and that was another reason I did a video on how to stop ruminating about your narcissist. Excuse me. Um, so so recognizing that is really important because you want to notice, wow, I'm still thinking about that person. I need to stop. I need to think about me. I need to, again, think about, what do I want? Who am I? What do I think? What do I feel? What do I need? Those questions are really key. And then when you start doing that and you start refilling your life and rebuilding your life and coming out of that isolation where you were constantly obsessed on that person because they made you do that, when you come out of that and you start to rebuild your sense of self, it's like, I can breathe. I can just be present within myself. I don't have to be ruminating on that person. I don't have to fix them. I don't have to diagnose them. I don't have to figure out how they got that way. I don't have to figure out if it was their parents or this or that or the other thing. Even if it's your adult child who's the narcissist, you don't have to figure out how they got that way, because half of that is you blaming yourself, and the other half of that is you blaming your partner, or their other parent. So that is not a very healthy activity either. I mean, I think we do need to be self-aware, and if there's something that I need to apologize to my kids about, I always do that. But on the other hand, torturing yourself with that is going to feed into that narcissistic personality's tendency to blame you and beat you up. So you don't want to participate in that yourself. You can take assessment of your own stuff if you want to. But in my experience, the when people have a narcissistic child, there was a dynamic that the child grew up with where one parent was pretty self-centered, whether it was alcoholism or drug abuse or narcissistic tendencies or workaholism or all kinds of stuff. And then the other parent was kind of that enabling, placating, peacekeeping parent. And so the child grows up watching this, and in the child's mind, and this is a child's mind, they say, well, I don't want to be that weak person, so I'm going to be that person. And so they start taking on those kinds of things. And that is really destructive and really painful, to then be that peacekeeping parent who has tried really hard to do the right thing and make everybody happy. And now this child of yours is beating you up the same way your partner did. It's a nightmare, and I really, my heart hurts for people that are going through that, and like I said, I know that it's happening a lot. Your video about narcissism in old age was very helpful, insightful, and validating. Thanks. So I think that it's really, that I noticed that that one was getting a lot of play lately too, and I think that's, some people are in this sandwich generation where they have a narcissistic parent and a narcissistic child and a narcissistic ex-partner or partner. And, again, we have to kind of go back to, how am I talking to myself inside my own head first? And I need to learn self-compassion, self-care, and then I can go out and face the world and watch all the circuses go by. This circus, that circus, and this circus. And then with that aging narcissistic parent or spouse, if you're older, your boundaries and your self-care, you have to even take it up another notch, because they may have some dementia on board as well. You might have some compassion for that, but you still don't need to be abused. There are services in the world. They may not be the nicest thing. There are all kinds of other options that you may have to choose for that person if they are too abusive to you for you to care for them. So even if you say, a lot of people say this, I'm the only one, I'm the last man standing, really, and nobody else will take care of them. The reality is, if somebody burns all their bridges, then they are left on that island. And so if they're left on that island and that's on them, again, set the boundaries, see if you can get them to come around, because sometimes they will. Sometimes they go, wow, this is my last bridge and I don't want to be trapped on this island. So you can, encourage that, be assertive, set your boundaries, take information, then take the information that comes back. Did they flip out and abuse you worse, or did they kind of go, "Oh crap, I need to smarten up a little bit here." So if they can roll with boundaries, if you can self-care and find other resources, then great. You can keep doing that. If you can't, you may have to go no contact, and that's really, really hard, but you're not alone either. Um, let's see if I covered everything. Do you think being a victim of a narcissist is an affliction in itself? It's definitely it becomes a I don't know if an affliction is the right word for it, and I'm trying to find the right word for it. It's definitely becomes a complete, I don't know if syndrome is the right word either, but when you have gotten yourself, if when you find yourself in that fog and you are trying to get out, it is absolutely deep and scary and hard, and there are no easy answers for it, and there's no way out but through, and there's nothing that's going to change unless you change it. And that's again why I put this book together, to give you the tools and the journaling, and so that you can rebuild from the inside out, set those boundaries, walk through life differently, because I think it becomes something that unfortunately, if you don't heal from the inside, if you don't learn self-care and self-compassion, you could end up attaching to another person that can treat you the same way. It looks different when it starts, and it sneaks up on you, and then you're in the same boat, or end up getting sucked into the other kinds of things with that. I really like your creepometer video. That was a fun one. It was the creepometer thing, and I've talked about that in my book too. It's really important that we recognize other people for who they are, and we take information in, and we don't sift it through our own wishes and wants and looking for the best in people and all that. Again, good qualities, love it, but it's not realistic. You have to look at the person for who they are and who they're presenting themselves to be. And you can see it from the way they treat the busboy, to the way they just deal with their lives, to the way they talk about past relationships, to the way they talk about family. You can see that, and your creepometer ought to be going off. And if it doesn't go off, then you need to JOMO, spend some time missing out and separating yourself from all of that socialization until you really get a handle on your own self-care, your own self-compassion. You're your own best friend. And then when people say things that don't jive and don't fit and don't feel good, you're not going to give them the time of day. Your creepometer goes off, you're done, it's over. Okay? All right. How does one distinguish between a shift in behavior to accept full responsibility versus hoovering? Is it a fundamental change, or is it temporary? So this is tough. I did one about is the breakdown a breakthrough? And I think I called it 10 ways you can tell that the narcissist breakdown is not a breakthrough. So for starters, it's really important, if those dramas are happening and they're frequent, that you would take a break no matter what. Even if you decide there may be hope in this, that you take a break to replenish yourself, to rebuild yourself, to separate emotionally, so that you can reclaim, rebuild, and work on your own self-compassion, your own self-care, and all that. You'll be able to see it better. And then if they've had breakdowns and that looks like a breakthrough, sit back and watch, because you'll see whether, for starters, if you say, let's take some time, and they melt down and collapse and implode and explode again, it's like, okay, that was good information. So when you set boundaries, somebody who is not really accepting responsibility is going to react. They're not going to say, okay, yeah, that's fair. They're going to go, and so that's good information. And so again, you set those boundaries and then you step back and you listen and watch and notice and say, that's good information. So typically, those breakdowns are not breakthroughs. They're just breakdowns, they're collapses, they're narcissistic collapses. They imploded, they exploded, and then they tried to placate or hoover to get back in your good graces. It's not a breakthrough. But if you step back and take some time and you watch them in their lives and they're actually doing better, you might want to tiptoe into that or not. It depends again on what the relationship is all about and whether you feel like you want to or need to get back into it. Well, that kind of brings us to around the end of our time. If there are any other pressing questions, go ahead and type them in now. And let me know if this is helpful. I want to sort of, again, reconnect with y'all and um, and kind of rebuild because I really value this community and I want to sort of be there for you in this way. Works for me. If this works for you, if you prefer package videos, give me in your comment section, just say the things that you'd like to hear more about. But if you think that these Q and A's are more fun or more interesting, then we'll do this a couple times a month, and I'm totally good with that. So everybody take care of yourselves and go ahead and keep typing in anything. So yeah, thank you so much for the congratulations. I really appreciate it. I wrote it for you all based on all of the feedback and all the comments and all the questions that I've received over the last 3 years. And so it was my gift back to you, to the community. And I just want you to enjoy it and get some help and some hope and get some skills and strategies to move forward. So I'm going to save this and record it and post it so that if you need to go back or if you want to share this with somebody that needed to hear it, you can always do that. Learning intimacy again after the narcissistic abuse. Wow, this is a biggie, and I think again it starts in here. So you have to know, what do I feel, what do I think, what do I need, and what do I want. And if you can answer all those questions, then you're ready. So if you can't, you're not ready. And you will likely get into something that's not healthy. But when you can answer all those things, when you have learned some communication skills so that you can share with somebody if you're not feeling comfortable, if you need more of their presence or you need more of your own space, those kinds of things, if you can communicate those things, then you're ready. And then slowly, so that and keeping your wise mind on board. I think in my title about the creepometer, I said how to develop a really healthy creepometer, and the one thing that would derail it, and the one thing that derails it is sex. And so if you jump into an intimate relationship too quickly, then your amygdala takes hold, then you're anxious, your fight, flight, freeze, everything goes south. And you can no longer use your wise mind to say, this person has all these great qualities, but has some really bad qualities that I cannot swing with. Once you engage intimately, you're less likely to keep your wise mind on board. So keep your wise mind on board, and your creepometer will work better. All right. Thank you, everybody. Take good care of yourselves. Use good self-care, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.